Hi, today I wanted to talk about HTML and CSS, some basic knowledge about it, and the different ways how we could implement it inside Bubble, and what ways and for what we could use it. Let's start with some basic of the HTML. I will talk about it a bit, and then we come back to the Bubble. I will use this scrimba.com platform. You can check some HTML CSS courses too. Just because we will have a small window and I will be able to show you what I create directly in this small window. Let's start with structure of the HTML. HTML basically it's just to create some components that are with standard design of the computer, like structure. And if we want to add some design on it, we will use CSS. Like we want to make it red, change roundness, change some add shadow and etc. It's all HTML, CSS, and HTML just for structure of this. Okay, the all HTML file, if we want to make it properly, has open and close tag of the HTML. This symbol means it's close tag. Then it has head, open and close tag, and body. In head tag, we can link to the HTML or to the CSS file. It's not important, we will not use it inside Bubble, but just to understand it better, inside header we can put some metadata or a link, for example, to CSS file. We can just say link and says that the source is the style CSS. And already inside body we can put the info that we want. For example, inside body I want to create a the container element. It's called div inside HTML. We will need to create an open tag div and then close it. Like we see, nothing happens because it just transparents like almost the group inside Bubble. Inside div, for example, we want to put text. Text we can use, for example, h1 tag. H1 it's tag for the certain size of the text, for example, hello, and we close it too. If we refresh, we'll see hello. Yes, we could not create div, it will be the same result, but I just wanted to create div to show that, for example, we can go now in CSS, exchange background for all this div and do some other changes. But let's imagine that we have like not one div. Let's imagine we have like 3 containers. And we want for each container be different color of the background. We need to identify somehow them. So we need to give them a class. For example, we can say this is div class and give a name, for example, div1. Let's just copy and says this div is div2 and this div is div3. Then again, nothing changed. Now we can go inside CSS and give some properties to this div. To change property of the class, we just put dot and write the class name. We called it div1, for example. Then we put curly bracket, and inside them we use some property that we want, for example, the ground, and we can choose a color, for example, red, like we see, it's changed, and do the same with all other divs. But let's change color, for example, I don't know, green and blue. Also, we can add pretty much the same properties like inside bubble. For example, if we want to do that green be a bit more down than it's right now, we can just say margin top and identify how much we want it, for example, 20 pixels. If something changed. Yes, now we can see that it's changed. And it's a lot of properties that we can add inside. We can change color of the text. For example, let's make it white, and etc. So basically, it's like in Bubble. Bubble gives us some HTML basic elements, and we can change these properties already on this. Let's just add, for example, shape. It's like some already style applied, but by default it's just transparent without roundness, and then by changing properties here we can change CSS basically of these elements. Okay, so let's move from this page to the bubble. So there is this couple of ways how we can use CSS HTML in bubble and for what. From the beginning, we will need to go on settings inside check general and check this box, so we can allow bubble to have this ID attributes to each element. This attribute here, it will appear if you checked this box. And before we actually apply the CSS, we will need also to have this plugin CSS. You can go and download it. Inside this search, it will allow us to add some classes and some ID that we want to apply to element. Also, there's a bit different between how we can identify how to apply this ID to CSS to ID or to class. Like I showed it here, I just use dot because we use dot for class. We identify class here. But inside bubble, we identify ID. And for ID, we will need to use hash. So again, if we identify class, we use dot, and if we identify ID, we use hash. By default, we identify ID, but using this plugin, we can also create class. We can create from ID to class. I will show it later. I prepared some examples of the CSS, HTML that we can use from this codepen.io. For example, we can create this box with some animation even on the borders. Like we see, it's just basically a container div with certain class that called cart. And there is a link. It's a anchor tag. They use it for a link for this text, but we will not take it. So how we need to look at this. Okay, we have a container, div, class cart, and some CSS. To implement it in Bubble, we need to put this CSS tool. It's plugin that we downloaded. We can just drag and drop it here. And then on page load, we can search action CSS. Add class to add class by ID, because if we look at this CSS, we can see that they use identifier class, because they use class here, dot. Class equal dot and ID equal hash. And to not change it every time on hash, I just want to create from ID class. I just can copy card here, ID card, and we will create from ID class, from ID card, we will create class ID, class card. And let's give to this container the same. Basically what we did, we say that ID card will be class card. So by this logic, we will need to change every time this dot on the hash. The next will be to apply this CSS. Let's add custom style, and we can just copy and paste it here. And let's just preview and see what happened. So we applied this CSS to this container. In theory, if we would not use this action, so we would not create a class from ID, we could use just this step number 4, but in entire code, we would need to change this dot on the hash. It would be the same result, but it just would take more long time to us to change this, all these dots. And for example, let's say we want to use it to create some row with some pricing. We could just say, for example, let's this container be 300 maximum and 100, and just group it inside row, put some text there. It was shape, so okay, it wasn't container. Let's just group it then, just to not change it. Or we can actually change it, it's not so long. We just put a new container, a new group, and give it the same attribute, the same ID, cart, column, 300, and 50. This is a row, and let's put it inside, and let's put the text. For example, price 1. Let's make it a bit bigger. Put some paddings. Make it center. Even a bit more big, I think. And let's say that when, for example, group B is hovered, Okay, let's remove it and put this condition on the text. This text color, font color, will be white, but by default, let's put it just transparent, like 0. And just duplicate it, paste, put some space in between, and make it, for example, maximum 1.2K. Let's see what we have. Yes, we can see that this applied to this ID, because it should be different IDs for this. Yes, but like we see, we can apply this and to different type of containers, for example, with some animation. Also, what we could do, let's check, for example, if we would not change it ID to class. Let's just change very fast on hash. It's the result. Like we can see, it's the same, just because we use the same ID, it's not, for each container would need the different ID, but because it's class. But like this, if we just define the CSS by ID by using hash, it can be applied to the not only one container. And the another example can be, for example, these different buttons, this some nice looking animation. Let's just check a random button, don't know, number 5. We can copy this. And let's just do not mix it, put in another, and change it on hash though. And give this ID to some button. For example, this button, center, button, create. And let's give it ID. Like we see, this animation applied. We just, let's check number 5, this, yes, we just used this color by default. Let's check if it's this orange one or not. Okay, let's just leave it like this. Yes. And okay, it's some ways, of course it's a lot more ways to use CSS HTML inside Bubble. For example, we can change scroll bar inside repeating groups, we can hide it if we don't need it, we can add scroll inside sidebar if it's with group focus or floating group, because by default inside floating group it's not allowed to use scroll, but with CSS we can add this feature. Also, for example, we can implement HTML CSS by using HTML element, even not applying any ID. For example, we can take just entire HTML and put it inside HTML element. and copy, just copy entire CSS. You see, it's applied, but it's just fix width of this element. 100, just to be sure. Yes, like we see, this applied on this inside this too. Also, we can, for example, use HTML elements to add some animation. We can go on the Lottie files, click, and just click on HTML and define some variables. For example, if you want to it loop, if you want to see control or not, copy this code and put it inside HTML element. And how we can see, we will see this animation inside. Thank you for watching. I hope it was a useful video, and of course it's a lot more ways to use it. I just wanted to show some basic of it and just to meet how to use HTML and CSS inside Bubble. Thank you. Bye.